Hi, welcome to your Strategic Dining Services online video training. Today our objective is to take you through the process of braising meat. And I think this will help you address one of the most heard complaints that we hear in our industry. The meat is always tough. So with these steps, I think you'll be able to use cuts of meat that are a little more affordable, also provide a great end product that can be versatile. They can be sliced to order or pre-cooked and then sliced and panned out and reheated for service. But I think your residents will really like this technique to really help tenderize the meat. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to take you through 3 different cuts of meat today. A brisket, spare ribs, and lastly a pork butt or a pork shoulder. We're going to start with the brisket. So I've got here about a 11 to 14 pound brisket. I'm going to start by just opening that up, throwing it into a full hotel pan. Once in the hotel pan, we're going to just add a little seasoning. We're going to keep these seasonings very simple. Again, this is probably the minimum that you should do on your brisket. From here, the ingredients you use or the flavorings that you're trying to utilize, there's really only held up by your imagination. So we have here a little bit of kosher salt. No need to trim the fat off the meat, as it's going to render and provide moisture and tenderness to the cut of meat. We've got here some black pepper, some garlic powder, onion powder, and lastly a little Worcestershire sauce. Now you notice how thick I put on those ingredients. You might say at first, wow, that seems like a lot. But remember, this is an 11 to 14 pound cut of meat. That's going to provide anywhere from 25 to 35 meals for your residents. So when you really take that amount of seasoning that we use, it's not that much. We're going to just give that a quick little rub. Then we're going to add a little water to the pan. Now, as this water is put in here, I just want to go over the basic steps of braising. First, usually the meat is seasoned, and then sometimes it's seared either on a flat top or a grill, placed into a pan, added seasonings and aromatics. Then a liquid is added, and I say liquid because it's not always water. Sometimes it might be a liqueur or wine. Then it's covered and cooked at a slow temperature for a long period of time to break down the connective tissue, usually about 275 to 300 degrees. And that's the basic process. So here again, we've taken the meat, we've added the seasonings, we've added water. A general guideline for braising is you want to bring the water or the liquid up anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of the way up the meat. You never want to cover the meat. If you do, then you'd be poaching or simmering. Now we're going to take some aluminum foil and we're going to cover the meat. Now, one thing I like to make sure that I do is when I cover this, if the meat is sticking up to where it's going to touch the aluminum foil, I always like to take a little piece of parchment and throw that on top so the meat doesn't react with the aluminum foil. Place the cover on top. Make sure it's nice and tight. And the reason behind that is we want to create a little bit of steam. The braising technique is actually a dual cooking method. It's both dry heat method and a moist heat method. Once it's finished, we're going to pop that in the oven. Again, a slow oven, about 275 degrees. This brisket is going to take anywhere from 4 to 5 hours. Okay, we've taken the brisket out after about 4 to 4.5 hours at 300 degrees, and we're going to take and slide it onto a cutting board here. And I want to talk just a couple minutes about this cut of meat. As you see, it's seasoned well, tender, ready for use. Now, what I highly recommend is that you cook this early in the day. Once it's complete, it can be held at 160 degrees, perfectly fine for a couple hours until service, and then carve to order on the line on a cutting board. Highly recommend that method. If you can't and you need to prepare this the day before, you can always go ahead and remove the fat, then slice it. And what I would recommend is if you need to do this ahead of time, that you go ahead and chill it first before you slice it. You can see here it's still hot. The meat is very tender. This is the top cap here, which you would need to clean up, take the fat off. And then again, once you've got it cleaned, and during service, you can keep a little piece of foil under a heat lamp, have this ready to go. And when you get an order, you just simply take it and take a slice off and set it right on the plate, and it's ready to go. It's beautiful. Again, this braising technique has provided tenderness. It's really developed the flavors, and the flavors have moved throughout the meat. But best of all, this has really helped reduce the amount of shrinkage. Because this process takes a long time and is a slow cooking process, it really reduces the amount of shrinkage. And on a cut of meat this size, it can really increase your yield anywhere from 2 to 4 portions per piece. So a great all-around cooking method. Okay, the second cut of meat that we're going to go ahead and braise or demonstrate the braising technique is ribs. Here I have some racks of basic spare ribs. We're going to start by taking these and taking the silver skin off. And on the back of the ribs, there's a thin layer of silver skin. If you left this on, it tends to not break down in the cooking process, and it'll lend to a little bit of chew on the final product. So what you want to do is start with by cutting back the silver skin with a knife just on the corner and getting it started. Once it's started, like so, you can actually grab a towel, a clean towel, and grab that silver skin and just give it a pull, and that should strip right off like so. And that's really all it takes. You can see there, you just toss that away. These have already been done. Once they're finished, I'm going to grab a cooking vessel. Again, if you're doing a full rack of ribs, you might be using a whole roasting pan or even a 4-inch hotel pan to fit a few more. I'm cooking only about 4 or 5 racks here, so I can use a 2-inch hotel pan. I'm going to start with the seasoning. So the first thing I'm going to do is take these, lay them out with the meat side up, and I'm going to start to season them. A little bit of kosher salt, onion powder, garlic powder, a little black pepper, cumin or ground cumin seed, a touch of paprika, and last, a little bit of Worcestershire. And I'm just going to take and pour those on. I'm going to give them a quick rub to kind of get the seasoning mixed into the meat. And again, you notice that I only season one side. And the reason is I'm actually going to stack these. So I'd rather just do a seasoning on one side that's a little heavy than to season both sides. Then I'm going to just shingle these in the pan, like so. Now again, going over the steps of the braising, we start by seasoning. Then if you want, you would brown the meat. We don't need to brown the ribs. Then we're going to add a liquid. For this particular liquid, I'm just going to add water. Again, if you want to be a little creative and add coffee or apple juice or something like that, or a liqueur to add flavorings to your meat, feel free. This one is just a basic step, simple seasoning. Then I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper. And again, just to let you know, if you take a look, the water is about 1/3 of the way up the meat. Again, I'm not totally submerging the meat in water. You just want to stress that. You just want to create enough moist heat, which is steam. You don't want to poach the meat. Then we're going to top it with foil. And again, this is going to go into a slow oven, about 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And these ribs, seasoned like this with that much liquid, should only take about 3.5 hours. Okay, we've allowed these ribs to braise for about 3 to 3.5 hours, a nice slow cooking. Once they're finished, we removed them from the pan and put them on a hotel pan and put them in the refrigerator. We've allowed those to cool. Now this step can be done the day before, which is the beauty of it. Now we take the cooked ribs that have been chilled, and it's perfect time to go ahead and portion and do a final seasoning on these. You can see they're nice and stiff due to the being chilled. And we're going to take these and we're going to cut them into a portion depending on the size that you're going to serve. I'm cutting these into double chops or double ribs, 2 pieces. It's a perfect time to go ahead and season these. So we're going to add a little bit of sauce. And then we're going to take these and we're going to shingle them into a hotel pan. Now again, this could be done hours before service. Makes for easy plating. And you can reheat these because they're fully cooked. They only need about 15 minutes to reheat. So they can be reheated as needed throughout the evening instead of reheating them all at the beginning of the night. Okay, we're going to take you through the last cut of meat and the braising techniques. Here we have a pork shoulder butt, sometimes called a pork shoulder or a pork butt. Depends on how you see it through your broadline purveyor when you go to order it. Just keep in mind that this is a part of the shoulder, even though it's called a pork butt. It's the butt of the shoulder and is usually got bone in. The cut of meat is extremely affordable, especially when you compare it to a pork loin or especially pork tenderloin. It does come from the shoulder, so even though it's called the butt, it is not from the hind end of the pig. That's actually the ham. This cut of meat is pretty tough, has a lot of connective tissue, but is laced with and marbled with a lot of fat. So it's ideal for this slow cooking method of braising to break down that connective tissue, allow that fat to kind of melt and tenderize the meat. And it's a great cut of meat that we're going to show you 2 different methods to serve this same cut of meat by cooking it the same way. So first thing I'm going to do is season the meat. I've taken the pork butt, I haven't removed any fat, I've left that on there. And I've got a variety of spices here. You can find this recipe in our recipe manual. We have some cumin, garlic, black pepper, onions, mustard, paprika, little kosher salt, also some chili powder, brown sugar. And what I've done is I've taken and I've mixed these ingredients into a rub. And the reason is that as I add these ingredients to the meat, I want to make sure that there's not any pockets of one particular spice found on one particular part of the meat. The reason is we're going to actually grill this to develop some initial flavor on, and I want to make sure that none of the spices burn. So we're going to coat this meat pretty liberally in the seasoning. Again, notice that I haven't added any oil. The moisture from the blood and water around the pork will be fine for the rub. Once I'm finished with that, I've got a grill here preheated, turned all the way up. We're going to take this, we're going to throw it right on the grill. Now, notice that we have this on a very high heat. We're going to give it a nice coloring all the way around, holding it up on the sides and on the bottom. Now, if you don't have a grill like this, you can always do this in a roasting pan or on a flat top. Either one's perfectly fine. But you want to develop a little bit of spice, a little bit of crust on this meat, so don't skip this step, whatever you do. Okay, we've marked the pork shoulder butt all the way around on all the sides, got a nice browning on all sides. We're going to place that into a pan and get ready for braising. So take the pan, we're going to add a little bit of water. Now again, reference earlier in the video, I mentioned that typically when you braise, you add the meat anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of the way up, depending on the cut of meat. This particular dish, because we're going to use it two different ways, one for a pulled pork application and one for a pork roast application, we don't need a lot of water here because eventually we're going to want to carve this meat to order. So once we have a little bit of water, about 1/3 of the way up, we're going to cover this with parchment and aluminum foil. Again, getting a very nice tight seal so we can create a little bit of steam during the cooking process, and into the oven. The third cut of meat that we braised earlier is the pork shoulder or pork butt. We let that slow cook for about 4 hours. Once it was just to finishing, not to the point where it was shredding or pulling for pork, we'd stop the cooking process and now we're holding it ready for service. I highly recommend that for this particular use, you're going to carve this to order on the line as a roast. Not typically seen in the communities. A lot of the communities, when they're carving pork to order or serving it, they're serving a more expensive cut of pork, something like a pork tenderloin or a pork loin. This is a great way to utilize this inexpensive or less expensive cut of meat. So we've taken this, and for demonstration purposes, what I did was I took that pork roast, and when it was just cooked through, I've taken half of it off, and we're cooking that a little bit longer for pulled pork. Again, this is this is how far you would want to take it for that carved to order pork butt on the line. So again, you're holding this at temperature during service. You get an order, and you're going to just carve that to order. And you can see that it holds up well. It's very tender. The connective tissue is still broken down, and it's a great way to utilize this cut of meat. So we cooked the pork shoulder roast to the point where we could cut it in half, and the first half we used for just slicing as a roast. So as you can see, we've cooked this for an additional hour to an hour and a half. It's great for a pulled pork application. You can just shred it right before service, add sauce. Great for barbecue or any other pulled pork application. So I hope you took these techniques that we showed you, this braising technique, and apply those to cuts that you may not be familiar with or cuts that your residents might find a little tougher. Apply these methods and I think you'll find a great product. I'm Jeff Kelly. Thanks for watching.